All right, we have NVIDIA earnings just 5 days away in the after hours on Wednesday, November the 20th, and I have my NVIDIA earnings projection for you out through the end of 2025, so leading into their fiscal year 2026. And then, so we're going to break that down for this quarter, next quarter, and then the following year. We're going to take a look at those projections that I have for you for NVIDIA and my NVIDIA stock price prediction to go along with it. We'll even pop up the charts and talk about what that NVIDIA stock price prediction looks like based on where we're at right now with those technicals, and I have a lot of commentary for you, a lot of thoughts that I want you to consider as you watch this video, and then we'll see when those results come out what I could do to improve upon the model that I have set forth. I think that it's a really good one. So let me put this up here for you, and we'll start getting into that commentary for NVIDIA as a company and the NVIDIA stock price prediction at the end of this. So financials, everything in millions except the earnings per share. So what you see for the orange is going to be low estimate, green is high estimate, and then the yellow is the average of those two estimates. So what we have for the average of those two estimates, $32.5 billion in revenue for the third quarter of 2024. So that's their fiscal year 2025. That's why you see FY25 up here. So it doesn't match up perfectly with the calendar that we have in 2024. So they have their own fiscal year calendar that they use. Regardless, so on the low end of this, because they said plus or minus 2% on 32.5 billion. So minus 2% will put us around here at 31,850 for what we have for revenue. And then that also puts us for this down at the low end of what we could have for their gross margin based off the gross profit. So coming in at 73.9%. So you'll notice that's lower than the 75.5 and the 74.7. So moving down from there for the operating expenses, $4.3 billion on that. Net income, 16.5 billion there as well. And then the EPS that we have coming in on that, the headline number for EPS, 68 cents. That is on the low end, and that wouldn't be so much of an improvement from what we would have from the previous quarter. Now, if we go over to the average from there, we'll come back to the high one on that one. The average right smack dab in the middle. Now, mind you, that 68 cents also goes along with an 18% tax rate. So that's based off their projection for 17% tax rate, give or take 1%. So that would be with an 18% tax rate as well. The average would be using the 17% tax rate. It also uses that they come in even with that expectation of 32.5 billion. And so as we go down through, you can see that the gross margin is much better. The operating expenses, I kept constant on this one. I think that this is going to be a really solid number for OpEx. If they come in below that, that's just gravy. That's even better for the earnings per share that we see. And so for this, headline EPS, 72 cents on the high end, which now, mind you, for my prediction, I do think that the high end is where we're going to look. I think that NVIDIA is one to beat the projections that they put out there. So this would be 2% to the high side of what they have. So the 32.5 billion plus 2%. So I think they're going to come in around this number, and the analyst expectations are actually right around that 33,150. We'll take a look to see the average analyst estimate in this video as well, so you can compare my results to what the analysts are saying that are out there. You'll notice it has the highest gross margin as well. The OpEx, I kept the same on this one. Operating income coming in at about almost 21 billion. And then a headline EPS, 76 cents. This would be a tax rate of 16% versus the 18% over here. And then also the 17% over here. Putting up some decent quarter over quarter changes. 8.2% is important for later on in the video. So remember that quarter over quarter change, 8.2%. That's going to be huge when we look at the stock price prediction for NVIDIA towards the end of this video. So let's move on from there down to what that means for EPS growth, about 5.5% EPS growth if we hit that. Now, moving over into the fourth quarter estimates that I have, assuming that we hit the high estimate here, I project that we could hit almost $5 billion in revenue for the fourth quarter. And you'll see that I put us in at a 75% margin on this one. And the OpEx actually up considerably, and that's based off of what we had said from NVIDIA themselves. So when we come in at about $5 billion in operating expenses, that's actually pretty consistent with what they're projecting, and also consistent, well, I should say, for the full fiscal year for 2025. So these earnings we would get coming out in February of next year is when we would actually see these come out. So towards the end of February, so 3 months about from where we're at right now. So expect it out about then. So I think that we're still going to have strong revenues, especially as Blackwell really hits full force and they really start to push out those Blackwell chips. I think that we're really going to start to see those revenues really continue to fill out from what we have right now. That's a 10% change. That's also important because that would be beyond the 8.2% quarter over quarter from Q2 to Q3. That would be accelerating with that growth in revenue from Q3 to Q4 with the launch of Blackwell. I think that we're going to be pulling forward quite a bit of revenue for that one. And that also leads into the commentary that I have later on that. And then check out the EPS on this one, 75% gross margin, and then 81 cents per share, still growing 7%, which is accelerating up from the 5.5% that we see from Q3 to Q4. Now that brings up the big question. First of all, are we even going to see this? We're going to have to see when the Q3 earnings comes out, what they project, what NVIDIA projects for the Q4 results for that. And if we have too much delays coming from Blackwell, well, that's something that could really hamper the revenue that we see. And that doesn't mean that the stock price would tank necessarily, because it could be like, okay, well, once those delays are done, what exactly is revenue looking like? Can you give us guidance on that leading into 2025? Are we still pretty much sold out as far as production capacity can handle? Is the high bandwidth memory, the HMB, whatever all the other letters are that go along with it, there's been supply issues there. Will that cut into their margins? So there are questions for this that really do bring into question, first of all, the revenue that we're going to see, the margin that we're going to see, and then that translating to the bottom line of what we see. And then we'll also have to check with the effective tax rate that we get for NVIDIA for Q4. So we'll be watching for that. So where does that put us for the full year for 2025? Let me move this over here for you. There we go. So full year 2025, that's this column right here that you see in the middle of your screen. So 125 billion. If Q3 and Q4 hit close to my estimates, I kept it rocking at a 75% gross margin. And you'll see as we look into the fiscal year 2026, you see 75, 75, and then 76. Again, I'll give commentary on each of those things. Headline EPS for the full year that we hear in February for fiscal year 25 for NVIDIA, $2.83. So very robust for what we had. I think it was only $1.30 per share last year. And so that really does make for quite a growth rate from 24 to 25. There should be some deceleration. We should see a slowdown in growth rates now that we have hit the point that we've hit with NVIDIA, that the huge ramp has happened. Now what does the rest of that ramp look like? Do we see multiples of returns on the NVIDIA stock? Well, I don't know that we see the 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x, 10x, coming in the near future for NVIDIA, but I do think that we have a very solid company that is going to continue to produce those results. So I want to draw your attention now to this orange part right here for fiscal year 26. So full year, 1 year. So this would be February 2025 that we would get these earnings. I'm sorry, February 2026 for fiscal year 2025. There we go. So 165 million. That's if we have 5% growth quarter over quarter. So that's consistently 5% more, 5% more, 5% more, 5% more revenue for every quarter that comes by from what we see from Q1 of fiscal year 26 up to Q4 of fiscal year 26. That just growing by 5% in revenue each time lands us at $165 billion worth of revenue. And it could translate if margins hold out. Now, mind you, that's a huge thing here. The margin holding out would continue to show that there's a huge demand moving forward for NVIDIA. So if this really starts to show signs of shrinking, that's really going to cut into their bottom line, and it changes the projection incredibly. So what we want to hear from NVIDIA is we want to hear that the demand is continuing through 2026, that we're really starting to see the orders fill out for that and really starting to fill up. And so that demand is so high that it's outstripping supply so much that people are still paying a premium to get a hold of the NVIDIA hardware and also the services, which now, mind you, there will be an end for hardware. Wherever that does happen, there needs to be that next part of the growth wave coming in at some point in time. So for right now, the hardware is the big thing, the NVIDIA infrastructure, with no real competitor in sight right now. But what happens if the institutions that are buying these, the companies that are buying these parts, are sated with the parts that they have, and they have more capacity than they can even really handle with the AI infrastructure that's out there? What if AI goes out of favor? There's always risks. There's always questions. I think 2025 is still going to be a good year. We want to hear that 2026 is also going to be a good year, so that fiscal year 2027 is also taken care of. Wall Street is going to care about the story for the next quarter, and so they're going to react immediately. So if there's signs of doubt coming in, that's going to hit the stock price right away. It's not going to wait. If there's 10% growth rate year over year, So this is my middle estimate that I have on here. Now or I should say the middle estimate that I have. So this is actually high and low. The analyst estimate is actually the high one. So if we get 10% quarter over quarter growth, that puts us at about $171 billion in revenue and $3.83 per share. So that would be even more so beyond what we saw for the fiscal year 26 at 5%. So we come in at 383, which definitely does change things on an earnings per share basis. And it also changes what we see in terms of the peg rate as well, because we're growing much faster for this. So moving on from there into the analyst estimate, 187.7 billion is the average analyst estimate. So this is the Wall Street analysts that are out there. So well beyond what I have for either my low or high numbers for 2025 for the quarters for fiscal year 26 that are coming for us. So just blowing things out of the water. So I have noted here that this 187.7 is the average analyst estimate as per what we see on TradingView, and that everything in between, these are reverse calculated values. So for me, I deconstructed the earnings per share of $4.22 that they've projected for the next fiscal year as the average analyst estimate. So I reverse engineered all these numbers in between. That's why they're not in bold. That's why I also pointed out that they're my calculated values so that it's not confused with what the analysts are currently putting out there. And based on my reverse engineering, that means an even higher gross margin. So that would mean that demand is continuing and that NVIDIA still holds a significant amount of pricing power for the people looking for its parts and services. I do think that services needs to come through, or the next generation, next wave of hardware that really is hitting the companies hard, that gives such supremacy over what's currently out there. And that also assumes that NVIDIA is the one to provide that. And they are well positioned to do that. They are so cash rich from where they're at right now. Tons of free cash flow. Their balance sheet looks incredible right now. So let's move on down to the stock price prediction. And so for that, I would just want to show you a little bit across the bottom here. So what I have is the forward PE based on the numbers that I have. So that's looking forward from right now. You can see trading rich. So 39.7, 38.4, and 34.8. And the peg ratios that go along with each of those, the low, middle, and high estimates for the fiscal year 26, 1.3 peg rate, which means on a forward-looking basis, the growth rate, if we come in at 5% quarter over quarter, we're actually running about 30% rich right now for the stock price. So that's if we do trade at that one peg, which would be pretty astounding for NVIDIA, because if they stay the top dogs, if they stay the leaders, I think that the market is going to give it a little bit of leeway. It's going to be to the upside on that. And even if you look at historical charts for trailing 12-month peg rates, they're well above 1. As a matter of fact, oftentimes they're up above 2. So I think that 1.3 is a very reasonable peg rate for them, even if it's up above the 1 that you'd be looking for, or if you're looking for significant growth for a good company, would a peg rate ideally below 1, which just take a look at fiscal year 26, 1.1. That's if we have 10% growth quarter over quarter for the next year following Q4 of this year. So finish up this year's fiscal calendar and into every quarter of the next one, 10% each time. You're still at a 1.1 peg. I still think that that gives room for growth beyond that, because it is NVIDIA. It is the top dog in the space, and I think that the market is going to favor it for those reasons. Now, mind you, the multiples can get compressed if the market sells off. Today in the markets was a messy day for the NASDAQ 100, for example, which was down about 2.5%. I haven't seen how it closed yet. I'm going to have to go and see how it closes, but NVIDIA, like, it sold off too. I mean, we are probably seeing some de-risking as far as NVIDIA goes for, well, leading up to its earnings. So today would be that day. People close out their options. People close out the swing positions that they have, and then we see what happens next week. Now, mind you, I think the Fed had a lot to do with today's sell-off, but that's outside this video. So what does that mean in terms of stock price prediction? Well, let me scroll here so you can see this. So the first two are my price predictions based off the peg ratios that we see. And then the last one, now mind you, this is not the analyst estimate. This is my estimate based off the analyst numbers. So that's why I have it labeled that way, just to be clear about how I have this priced right now. So if we see that 5% quarter over quarter growth throughout fiscal year 2026, and we run at a 1.3 peg, you can see right here, all estimates are based on a forward peg of 1.3. So if we stay at a 1.3 peg, then we're sitting about right for where the stock is right now, or I should say where it was as of the Thursday close on November the 14th. That's where I had this priced at. If we're looking at 1.1, again, based off of 11/14, so November the 14th, the closing value for that one, $176 per share if we see 10% quarter over quarter. So if that's what you believe is coming our way, we have a significant amount of upside from where we're at right now, about 20% more to that one. If instead we're looking to see what 2026 has to hold and the analysts are right about this, that blows my estimates out of the water, nearly doubling from where we're at right now. And again, that's based off of taking these PEG ratios and saying, hey, instead of being 1.3, these should be up, or instead of being at 0.7 or 1.1, these should be up at 1.3. Instead, that adjustment would pull these values upward from where they're at right now. So, I mean, that 271, listen, I'm not saying that it's out of the picture, but man, we would need to see some serious revenue pumping for NVIDIA throughout 2026 to see the growth rates like that really flesh out for us. So a few things to consider, by the way. Blackwell distribution coming up. We should see that full ramp coming our way in this, maybe this quarter 4. Maybe it's also in 2025 that we really see that production ramp coming out and really hit mass market in 2025. I think that that's a boon to NVIDIA, and as long as that demand is still outstripping anything that TSM can produce, or that people just can't get their hands for whatever on the parts for NVIDIA, that's all gravy for NVIDIA. That demand where people are chomping at the bit and just can't get the parts and are still taking inferior parts because they can't get a hold of the superior ones. So that's something to keep in mind. I think that's a benefit to NVIDIA. We'll see if that holds up. The industries are still waking up to AI, still figuring out where it fits in. And I think that people are going to find more use cases over time and be pushing for more products and services from NVIDIA as a result. The fact that they have a full stack vertical integration, also very, very huge, especially if they plan to branch out and hit that next band of the S-curve, or continue the middle part of the S-curve where that steepest rise in growth happens in a short amount of time or in the same amount of time. Having that full stack vertical integration keeps things cheap for them. It can help keep the margins high. It can help keep the demand within that bubble for, and I don't mean like a stock market bubble, but I mean the AI sphere, if you will, that just keeps that demand going for NVIDIA as they own the rights to the things that they're selling, and that they don't really have to pay people extra margin on top for those parts and services. That's all a boon to them, and keeping their margins full, and also filling out their top and bottom lines for revenue and net income respectively. I think NVIDIA being at the top is going to have a huge developer draw that is going to draw the world's best talent to NVIDIA. I think that it already has, and I think it's going to continue. And they definitely have the money to pay out there. And also the stock-based compensation can also be part of that as well. And so I think the developer draw is a big part that we want to make sure that we're counting into looking at on a forward basis for NVIDIA continuing to dominate in their space. So big flashy finish to the year. I still think that we're going to get it. I think Q4 is going to be huge for us. Now, mind you, some of the deliveries on the Blackwell chips, that's going to be the big thing. We want to hear about that during the earnings call. That kind of makes me a little bit nervous. Maybe I should have this yellow instead of black, but then it'd be hard to see. Maybe orange, right between the black and the red. We would see $50 billion in share repurchasing power. I think some share repurchases is also a reason to be bullish on this. That if they buy the shares, if they're willing to pay that $140 per share, where it's at right now, $150 per share, then buying at those higher prices, it sort of speaks to NVIDIA saying, hey, we know our stock's worth at least this much. It would sort of set a floor, if you will, to NVIDIA's stock price. So the share repurchases, always good, takes the shares that we currently own, those of us who are long-term investors in NVIDIA, that's going to be a boon to us as well. And I also think that we're going to hear about a dividend increase with the earnings coming out. So I think it's going to go up. I think right now it's 1 cent per share. I think it's going to go up to 2 cents per share. We got to watch out for trade restrictions with China, and we also want to pay attention to long-term growth sustainability. So we definitely want to hear about how they're able to manage with China, because I think that they account for about 10% of NVIDIA's revenue is the trade with China. So we want to pay attention to that. With the Trump tariffs too, how does that affect things for them as well? That can be something that we want to pay attention to. Long-term growth sustainability, like I said, that one's probably the biggest one. That's the thing that we want to listen for in the earnings call. That can take any of these price predictions that we have. If the growth isn't there, these just all flat. They fall flat. Mind you, something else that can impact these numbers that we see for PE, that we see for growth, that could be something just in the markets that the stocks just aren't trading for as much as they used to. Now, mind you, that can be something that actually shrinks the PE, but it could also it could increase the PEG ratios or decrease the PEG ratios. My goodness. So that's something that we want to pay attention to as well, and we want to look for that value come back. So the price dropping, the PE dropping, would actually be something that, assuming that the growth stayed constant for NVIDIA, that it would decrease the PEG ratios, making even more of a value play from where we'd be at right now. So that's the commentary that I have. That's my NVIDIA stock price prediction and my NVIDIA earnings projection. Let's bring up the charts, and I also want to show you the analyst estimates on this so you can see what I think is going on with NVIDIA. So let me snag Trading View, bring it up on screen for you. All right, so here we go. For NVIDIA, where's 175 put us? Because that's the one that I think that people are going to be excited about. And for that, let me stretch that out, and this is the way we want to move it. 175 puts us all the way up here, which is actually a really important Fibonacci extension value. So we want to pay attention to that right now. Today, let me see, it's 4:15, so the market closed, and today at about $142 per share, just shy of 142. And from a technical standpoint, by the way, when we look at this, look at that area of support that we have found. And by the way, my technicals have been on point and solid. Look at that line of resistance and just how many times we got rejected before this thing finally gave up. And it actually took a market sell itself in order to see that happen. Now, mind you, I think the comments that we got from the Fed are part of what's affecting the overall market, especially the NASDAQ 100 being down. Let me see, down today, 2.38% as of the close, as tracked by QQQ. Now, mind you, I think that this is an important spot, staying in this channel. It looks like we're in a near-term bullish channel right now. For NVIDIA, we could see that value start to rip if growth is expected to be sustainable, if we get excellent guidance coming out for Q4, if we get good news on Blackwell. We want to hear, and also other growth metrics that we would have out there, like demand for NVIDIA services would be huge as well. So let me bring up the analyst numbers. We'll take a look at those, and then we'll wrap up the video, which, by the way, if you guys want to see my technicals before they hit YouTube, you want to see my buys and sells, talk to me and my community members directly, you can absolutely do it by using the link down in the description for the Patreon. Click, sign up, head on over to the Discord. You'll find everything over there. And then if you guys want to learn to do the technical analysis yourself, I also have a link for Stockmo Academy. Stockmo is a personal friend of mine, one of my best friends in the whole wide world, by the way. Stockmo himself, great guy. He and Mrs. Mo put together a technical analysis trading course, and they are educational professionals. Around 20 years in the biz. I think it's actually more than 20 years. I'll let them speak for themselves. I have 17, and I know that they were in education long before I was. So that's what I'm basing it off of. I have my doctorate in education. I've gone through and I've vetted the technical analysis course, taking what I know from trading, what I know from education, and I'm telling you, it is top notch. And furthermore, even better than just learning about technical analysis, there's also the bread recipe trading strategy, which you can use to trade. And I'll tell you what, talking about figuring out when stocks are going to move up, down, playing them either way. It's a trading strategy I use myself, Stockmo uses himself, and people are putting out all sorts of testimonials about the success that they're having using the bread recipe trading strategy. And Stockmo Academy course will also set that up for you. I'll show you how to set it up, walk you right through it, and there's a learning community where you can go and ask your questions and get them answered to find out any of the nuances that you might need in order to really solidify your approach to technical analysis trading and the bread recipe trading strategy. All right, so about what we see here, I switched this over to the annual numbers. So 286 is what the analyst estimate is for the full year for 2025, fiscal year 25. So that's as of the end of this year, which I think that their financials actually end at the end of January of 26, and that's why it's January 25. That's why it's fiscal year 25. So for the end of this year, all 4 quarters together, 286, I think added at 283, and then they have a 422, and so for me, that's north of what I have by about another 10%, just so you know. Now, what I see when I look at this is I actually see a bit of an S-curve where we have a slow ramp at first, and then we accelerate earnings, and then they start to taper off again as we get into 2027. We don't want to see that biggest ramp end at 25. We want to see it carry into 26. So we want to keep that in mind, that the bigger that we can extend this S-curve, the more sharply that we have that pointing upward, the stronger movement we should see to the upside from NVIDIA stock. So we want to see that S-curve is either getting stretched upward or even stretched outward a little bit, as long as we're not flattening it out and peaking and hitting the top, because as soon as that growth goes away, then the PEG ratio goes up significantly, taking away the value of the stock, so we don't see as much of a stock price on that. We end up seeing something that goes stagnant on us or falls a little bit, and I'd rather not see either one, especially as a long-term investor. And in NVIDIA, plus everybody likes to see the stock market go up, and NVIDIA at a $3.6 trillion market cap, maybe 3.5 after today, I'd have to go and look, but still about $3.5 trillion, I almost said billion, $3.5 trillion in market cap is just a behemoth. So when we look at the revenue side of things, you can see, once again, look at the slow ramp that we have. Big boost in 23, big boost in 24, sort of big in 25, but then by 26, you can see us sort of flattening off for this part of the curve that's up here. We want to see 26 get pushed up. We want to see that curve, that steepness return to this. We want to see it keep going. That is going to be the thing that is really super bullish for NVIDIA stock. I don't know that we get that full year's guidance coming up. I think we're going to get quarterly guidance, and then maybe when we get the full year numbers for fiscal year 25, maybe we'll get that outlook coming up for 26. We might still hear about business updates for calendar year 26 coming up. We want to hear that NVIDIA is still just flying off the shelves faster than they can be stocked up for 26 as well, and that's going to be something that could be incredibly bullish from here, which, by the way, analysts estimate for the calendar year of 25 for their fiscal year goes up. There's that 187. After that, 225 billion, then 240. So really starting to flatten out. So we had a 60 billion revenue gain projected from this year to next. And then after that, only 40. So from 60 to 40 and then to 15. So 60, 40, 15, as those revenues are building for these projections, that's a slowdown in that growth. That's hitting the top of the S curve. And so if we peak out to that sooner, the sooner that that's expected to happen, that growth isn't there anymore, that the uncertainty of its growth starts to come in, that's something that's going to push the stock back down. So just that you're aware of that. We want to hear about NVIDIA. We want to hear about parts and services, that the demand remains, that they're able to still get whatever parts they're still able to serve China with some of its products, that they're not losing that revenue, or if they lose it in China, that they're able to make it up in other parts of the world instead. Those are all going to be good things. So guys, you're going to have to let me know down in the comments what you think of my stock price prediction and earnings projection. I'd absolutely love to hear from you about that. If you just love NVIDIA, say hello there. Say hi if you want to. And remember, if you guys want to get access to my technicals, my buys and sells, you can do so using the link down in the description for the Patreon. Just click that, sign up, and head on over to the Discord. And that Stockmo Academy course, it is legit. It is set up. It is solid. I even have a chapter in there on options if you want to check it out. So guys, that link for Stockmo Academy down in the description. Make sure you use code word DOCTOR, D-O-C-T-O-R, when you do, and that's going to give you a massive discount on that course. And people are putting out the testimonials that they're paying for their course in as little as one trade using that bread recipe trading strategy. Remember that coupon code DOCTOR when you sign up. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I am Dr. Stock, Doctor of Education. Remember, my friends, that learning is earning. We'll see you in the next video.